Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Emotional Grit, the podcast where you can learn about the power of perspective and the science that fuels us. I'm your host, Jennifer Fernjack, and I'm grateful to say that my guest today is Ashley Corbett. We're going to be talking about the science of laughter and how it's played a huge role in her brain tumor story. Also, feel free to go to YouTube to like and subscribe to the video here and actually the actual podcast itself, and we'll go ahead and get things started. So, Ashley, thank you for being here.
Yes, thanks for inviting me.
No problem. So just for context for the listeners, we met before the pandemic as part of these virtual support group meetings that are provided by Brains Together, which is an organization down in Rochester, Minnesota. It's an organization where they have an annual fundraising event to raise money for brain tumor research at the Mayo Clinic. And then, of course, as part of our actual monthly meetings, whether it's a caregiver's question or a survivor's question or a patient's question, we can actually run them by people from the Mayo Clinic to get their opinions on things and ideas, and then talk just amongst ourselves as a group and go, have you experienced this? Or what do you think about that? Or what's worked for you? Or what are you struggling with? So really, really interesting stuff. But as part of that, I've been incredibly inspired by your story because as you've experienced things, you have incorporated humor to help you. Obviously, you're not in denial, but it's a matter of addressing the symptoms and trying to figure out the how and just persevere. So, all that being said, please take the listeners back to when you first found out, or when your family found out that you had a brain tumor.
Sure. To step back a little bit further, even I've been diagnosed with cancer twice. So my first cancer was cancer of the eyes, and that was diagnosed at 6 months old. And we learned we know for certain after some testing that I have a genetic mutation, and that genetic mutation um, sets me up as being more prone to getting certain types of cancers or different things. And so I've been under the care of Mayo Clinic my whole life. And one day my eye doctor just said, "Hey, have we done a full head scan lately?" And I said, "No." And so they just did a full head scan. And actually, we did the scan in November. I saw my doctor in February and he looked at it. And I remember he said, "Well, your eyes look great." And I said, "Oh, good." And he said, "And also there's a brain tumor." And I was like, "What?"
Right.
So,
Excuse me. Wait a minute here.
yeah, that was
Wow.
quite shocking, very unexpected. And as much as I had known and learned about my cancer all my life, like I had no idea this was a thing, but it is. I've learned since then through support group too. They've been super helpful, but I've learned that one of the long-term side effects of radiation treatment is tumors. So
Okay.
the radiation that I had as an infant stays in you, and 30 plus years later, we found some brain tumors that are probably a result of that radiation.
Wow. So did you ever have any kind of symptoms that maybe made you think like, is something else wrong that turned out to be the brain tumor, or did you have no clue that there was even an issue in that regard?
No other symptoms, had no clue.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's like my scenario. I never even had a headache. I mean, like just nothing. And it was
Okay.
through an eye exam that I had that my eye doctor said your peripheral vision's not quite what it used to be. Even though I have peripheral vision still, it just wasn't quite as good for 2 years in a row. And that's what prompted an eye specialist and then an MRI. And shocker, there's a golf ball sized tumor that's right there. So it's interesting how things can just change.
Yeah, good on your doctor for paying attention and following through.
Oh, absolutely. So what type of tumor or tumors are there?
So now, I was diagnosed first in with my first brain tumor in 2018. So it's been about 6 years, and we now have identified three separate meningiomas. Meningiomas are usually non-cancerous brain tumors that grow slowly, and so yeah, I've got three of them. I was told from the start that if they continued to grow and to start getting to a point where they could cause problems, the preferred treatment option would be gamma knife, which is a radiosurgery. It's a targeted way to get a good dose of radiation only on the tumor cells. And so in 2020, and then also in 2022, I've had Gamma Knife, where we targeted each of the 3 tumors, and they have stopped growing at this point. So very good
Cool.
news.
So how does Gamma Knife exactly work? Like how does the procedure work? What does it entail? People when they mention it usually kind of wince a little bit, but I don't know enough about it.
Yeah,
So how does it
yeah.
work?
So from a technical standpoint, essentially they're taking many beams of low dose radiation. I don't know or remember how many, but many beams of low dose radiation, and then they target them so that they intersect at the tumor point. So it's a one trip, like you go in, they do it, and you leave and you're done. And it works over time. Uh the procedure is not super fun. Um, but essentially what they do is they call it a halo. I think that's a little bit too soft of a term for me, but basically they put a metal crown around your head and they screw it into your skull at 4 different points so that it doesn't move. And
So
then,
they screw it into your skull while you're awake?
yep, yeah, that's the
Okay.
least fun part of it all.
That must be so surreal. I mean, I've heard people say that is it the skull, or is it the head itself or the brain where there aren't a lot of nerves per se, but you still could, I'm assuming, feel the pressure of it,
Yeah.
how does that work?
And they inject some numbing stuff at the sites. So they do that to help, but they're doing that kind of at the same time to just move it all as quickly as they can. Um, so it's still kind of alarming. And yes, you feel the pressure of that as when it's on your head. So it's not so much the sharp pain of like the screws or the injection, but just the pressure of having that. I
The
don't know what it
psychology of it too.
titanium. Yeah. And so that I was very nervous for. So after they put that halo on your head, they bring you back to get an MRI. They put a helmet over you and they put you in the MRI machine so that they can pinpoint precisely where the tumor is now in relation to where that halo is. And then the doctor spends some time preparing the treatment, getting stuff ready to go, and then they bring you back to a machine that's a little bit like kind of feels to me kind of like a CAT scan machine. It's more open than an MRI, but then they lock that frame in place so that you can't move, and then you'll sit there for any given amount of time. My first one was about 90 some minutes, which was I believe is on the longer end of things. The second time I was
So
in there, it was 45.
so this first time where it's like an hour and a half, is that where you have these screws in your head with the halo? How did you, like, what was going through your mind? Did you like think about lyrics to songs, or did you quiz yourself on math problems, or what did you do to get your mind off of what was going on?
Sure. So what I did in this situation is it was kind of a dark, quiet room, and I don't. It's hard to explain, but because of the light and the apparatus that was in front of my field of vision, it looked like a sunset or a sunrise, and I think I'm 90% confident at this point that there was like a fly or a bug in the machine, but it looked like a seagull.
Oh, that's funny. Right. That's awesome.
Yes. And so I don't know that's just kind of I just imagined that I was on a beach, that I was just watching the sunrise, the sunset, and let my mind wander wherever it needed to. There were a few points at which I started counting just because I was quite bored, but then I got bored of counting and came back to the beach.
Right. It's so interesting how your mind can be your friend or your foe. And I know when I had to have a couple of functional MRIs, so I
Mm.
was in the MRI machine in the actual enclosure for a long time. People had told me ahead of time, count backwards from 100 by 3. like try to get your mind on something that's kind of goofy.
Yeah.
There were other scenarios where I heard people say that because the machine has those banging noises that are around your head,
Uh-huh.
people had had the MRIs so many times that they would pretend the banging was part of a symphony. So they'd be like, there go the snare drums, there go the trombones, there go the whatever, and they would try to in their mind predict where is that next sound going to come from, and
Yes.
because you want a sense of control.
Yes. So when I've gotten a lot of MRIs. This year I think I will break my record. So I think I will have 5 or 6 total MRIs this year. But in the MRI machine, it is very loud. And the first, I want to say like 4 or 5 times that I had an MRI, it sound because of the sounds and because of the cage that they kind of put to keep your head stable when they're doing a brain MRI. I felt like I was in an X-wing fighter on Star Wars. And so all the
Nice.
sounds, I would start to imagine, like, well, what ship, like, what's happening now? Like, is someone shooting at me, or did we run into something? Or
That is so smart. So what you were doing is something that I wrote about in my book called cognitive reframing. And it's where it's not the stimulus that's the problem, which in this case is the enclosure of the machine. It's how you perceive it that can make a difference. So you pretended that you were in Star Wars, ready to go out and fight for your freedom and what have you. Whereas when I was in the enclosure of an MRI, I pretended that I was back in high school in a tanning booth. And
oh,
I'm not trying to say that nowadays that I would use a tanning booth, but back then it meant you were going to prom or going on vacation. So because we
yes,
didn't know any better. But whether it's being in a tanning booth or being like you're going to fly around on Star Wars, you're doing it by choice. So it's a sense of control. So good for you. That's fantastic. So I know that you, as I alluded to earlier, have used humor in a number of different ways. What prompted you to name your tumors? Was there a certain pivotal moment, or kind of a where you thought about it randomly and finally just did it, or?
I love this because I did not plan this. I After that first diagnosis, I had started having some conversations with some close friends, and I just remember one of my friends looked at me and asked, "Well, like, are you gonna name it?" And I was like I hadn't thought about that, and I was like Toby the tumor, and she was like, I don't know. I was like, wait, that's it. And so my first middle
That's
name
awesome.
is Toby the tumor.
Right. So
Where did Toby come from? I don't know. Is there a reference I was drawing on? Absolutely not. Are there good references now when I think about it? Yes, there are.
right. But the thing is, it's you rather than being intimidated by the situation, you owned it because it's kind of like, yeah, you know what? It's there. I can't control it. It is what it is. So I'm going to just kind of take it for what it's worth and name it and have fun with it. I know there was somebody else in our brain tumor support group that I think his tumor was named Steve, if I'm not mistaken. And
Good.
he would make comments. Yeah, he'd make comments
Right.
like, yeah, well, Steve and I went to a baseball game yesterday, so he would, kind of have the context like that.
Yeah.
But in my book, I wrote about how like the actual physicality of laughing can actually lower the stress hormone cortisol, and it can actually influence the feel-good chemicals of the brain, such as dopamine or serotonin. It can also help influence your immune system and also help with sleep patterns as well. So when people say it feels so good to laugh, it actually does. It's just so circling back to Toby, I want people to know about the whole Torch Toby campaign. I think it's so
Excellent.
funny.
I love this. So yes, Toby was the first um, tumor we found, and I'm a creative person. I was a graphic design major, so I've always been kind of an artist. And I just remember as I was starting to try and figure out how to process this, um, because when I found out, if you followed along, I was diagnosed in 2018, didn't have my first treatment until 2020, because like you said, there were no symptoms.
Yeah.
And so I was told, we are going to wait and watch, which was hard to process. Like all my life it's been, well, we need to fix it. We find a tumor, we're going to fix it.
Right,
Well,
right.
this tumor is close to my left eye. I only have vision in my left eye, and so we're really cautious. And so initially, it's not touching your eye. We're not super concerned. So we're just gonna keep an eye on it. So
Unintended, yes.
as I was processing that, I came up with this idea that I wanted to design a campaign so that if and when my doctor said it's time for treatment, I had something to focus on. And I had something that I could share with the world and a way for people to support me. So
Yes.
I had already named it Toby. And so came up with the campaign Torch Toby because I mean, I don't know if that's really an accurate description of Gamma Knife, but it's close enough. So
Works for me.
yes, so Torch Toby, I don't know if this will show up very well.
I can see the word torch.
I
Can you hold
don't
it up
know
a little
why
bit higher? There we go. Torch Toby. Yep.
and so oh, and then you can see it says Torch Toby and Earl,
Oh, yep. I saw the word Earl on there too.
because then we found my next tumor, um, over by my right eye, and I named that one Earl. I don't again, truly don't know why. Can think of reasons now why that was a good choice, but,
And I was going to
um,
ask if it's like an acronym or if it's like, named after someone or okay.
nope, really random. And then I realized after I launched my design that I actually had a friend named Toby, and I
Oh,
apologized to them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No offense.
It's yeah, nothing to do with you. The other thing that made me happy about them is that, like, that shirt, all it says is "Torch Toby and Earl." Like, there's no explanation. So anyone who does not know where it came from or me or my story, it's a mystery.
Right, right. And I'm trying to
So,
remember, couldn't people buy the t-shirt?
yep.
That's what I thought.
Yes, I designed them, put them up on a website online where they produced the shirts and, like, they took the money and sent them off to the people who bought them. So I didn't have to do any of that work. I just set it up and got myself a shirt and then sold over 100 of them to family and friends,
Wow.
which was
That's
like
really
blew my mind.
wow. So the thing about it is that obviously you're going to feel good about it because of the fact that hey, it's your tumor or tumors because Earl was in there too. But also think of how you inspired people because it showed that you know what? Again, you can't control the scenario, but you can at least have a voice in how you experience it. And
Mhm.
the laughter made a big difference. But
Yes.
um, now can people still buy the t-shirts, or is that just more of a campaign that you had back then?
You
Oh
can
my
still buy the
gosh.
t-shirt. So I can give you the link to that.
I was gonna say people are gonna might want to know where to do that, but the reason why I found out that laughter can affect people physically is because years ago, before I even knew that I even had a brain tumor, I had a dermatology appointment. And I was laying at my dermatologist's table. He's on one side, his nurse Felicia is on the other, and he was simply removing a ganglion cyst from my arm. Shouldn't be
Okay.
that big of a deal. But I have what's called an overactive vasovagal response where I'll pass out. So it's all of a sudden it affects my heart rate and my hands get clammy, my vision starts to go like this, my ears start to ring, and I'm out. So I passed out in his office before. So during this procedure, they had me laying flat, like, that kind of thing. And at one point, my ears began to ring, and I could tell I'm like, "Ooh, something's wrong here." So I said to them, "You guys are about to lose me." So the dermatologist says to his nurse, "Quick, Felicia, ask her a question." So she goes, "What's 12 times 5?" And then he goes, "No, ask her a question she knows." Well, as soon as I began to laugh, they literally saw the color come back into my face.
Mhm.
They literally saw physically how laughter was affecting me physically. And then a little bit later, he was sewing me up. So of course I could feel the tugging of the skin and whatever. And again, I said, okay, now you guys are about to lose me. Excuse me. At that point, I said, how's it going over there, Doc? And he goes, well, I'm not going to win a quilting bee anytime soon, but I think things are going well. And again, the laughter, they saw color come back into my face. And that's what
Yeah.
prompted me to do research and find out about how does laughter affect people physically. So I know now when I do my public speaking, I'll encourage people who are stressed out from work, or maybe they're having family issues or a health scare or whatever. Get out your smartphone and then pull up the Pandora app. And on Pandora, pick your comedian of choice and listen to that comedian while you're commuting or you're working from home or whatever. You can control who that person is, and laugh about it. And I
Yeah.
also know that after my surgery, when I was home healing. Some colleagues of mine were kind enough to come by and visit. And these are like salt of the earth guys who I'd traveled with before. They're like brothers of mine. And people to this day where I would give them the shirt off my back. You know, they're really, really great people. But I was also initially a little bit self-conscious because I thought, well, when they came over, they were going to see me with 8 inches of stitches from here down to here. My head was partially shaved, my eye was swollen shut, and I was wearing like a button-up shirt because I couldn't pull a shirt over my head. I couldn't wear makeup because it hurt to put makeup on and touch the nerves in my face and whatever. But I thought, okay, I could either not have them come over and of course not be embarrassed, but feel incredibly isolated, or I could just own it, not let it own me and have them come over, you know? And I thought back to, and again, to keep in mind this happened when in my 40s. But I thought about years earlier, back when I was in first grade and I got glasses. And I remember saying to my dad, I'm like, I don't want to go to school today because the kids are going to laugh at me. And he's like, well, just laugh with them. And then you're owning it. And then they're gonna leave you alone then and go on to somebody else or whatever. So I was empowered by that wisdom that was shared with me back when I was like 8 or whatever. So fast forward to these guys coming over to visit me, and I answered the front door of my condo, and they all were kind of like initially taken aback, but wanted to look polite and whatever. But I could tell they were a little bit uncomfortable. So without missing a beat, I pointed to my eye that was swollen shut, and I said something to the effect of, "If you think this is bad, you should see the other guy." And all of a sudden they started laughing. You know, we joked around about maybe I should put a picture on Match.com. You know, but then they're like, no, I have a huge advantage over the other women that are out there. That's not fair, you know, whatever, you know, but it again, then I wasn't self-conscious. I was happy to have them there. And
Hmm.
there was a lot of added value, you know, to that. So
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. I
you know,
I can relate to that too. Told you I had cancer in both my eyes. I lost vision in my right eye, but I've been wearing glasses or corrective lenses since I was before I started kindergarten. So can relate. I have had a lot of bullying and
yeah,
name calling because of my glasses. Very strong prescription, um, and I struggled with that for a long time. I got contact lenses eventually. Was and so grateful to have those. Um,
yeah,
but when I played softball my whole life. That is my sport of choice. Like that's kind of the sport that I really stuck with. And so when I got to college and started playing college softball, that was the first time that my teammates like um could just embrace that with me and started making like just having fun and just making jokes about it. If in baseball and softball, one of the common cheers when you're up to bat, like especially if you can watch a ball go by and not swing at it, they'll say good eye. Well, good eye became quite the joke because I only had one eye.
oh, right, right. But
Yes.
isn't it interesting how there can be that social connectedness through laughter? You
Yeah.
know?
Yes,
That's
and
huge.
it was so wonderful for me to see that, to see them just embrace that and to be able to smile and laugh. And there are totally situations and people that can't do humor, that don't do humor, and,
Yeah,
like, you need to respect that, and there are
yeah,
places and times where, that's not the place, but,
yeah.
I mean, our softball team was kinda like a family, and that was pretty special. My junior year,
Totally.
I think, we were playing a scrimmage, and my catcher was taken to the hospital because she, ended up having, like, a scratch in her retina, something to that effect, and came back with a patch over her eye. And I was like, "Oh, that's terrible." And so she's trying to, like, throw and catch, and she's like, "I don't know how you do this, Ashley, with one eye."
Right.
And so I was like, "Well, in solidarity, I got a patch and wore my patch as long as she had to wear hers."
Good for you. And
Yes.
I thought you were gonna say people were like calling her a pirate or something.
No, I joined her and we just lived it up. So,
That speaks volumes of your character because you knew that behind the scenes it was probably a sore spot for her, but then by joining her, that's empowering. So that's really
mhm,
cool. I know a number of years ago, I was at the Minneapolis airport and I saw firsthand how there could be that connectedness, you know, socially with laughing. I'm sitting at the gate waiting for a flight, and the gate agent looked really young. And all of a sudden, over the loudspeaker, well, and I should backtrack. all the people at the gate were like buried in their laptops or buried in their smartphone or whatever. Like no one was paying attention to each other. But all of a sudden, the gate agent over the loudspeaker says, Delta now welcomes any children with small parents. Like he totally screwed it up. All of a sudden, all these people look up from their laptops, look at each other, start laughing, and the gate agent was laughing too, like that kind of thing. But it brought all these strangers together, and it was pretty amazing. And it made me think of how there can also be that connectedness, even just one on one with people. So it made me think about a mistake that I made years before that when I worked at a restaurant. So when I was in my early 20s, I bought my first house. And so I had my day job at an office. In the evenings, I worked part-time at a restaurant, hosting, and then I had a renter to make my car payment. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So, but doing those shifts at night after working all day at the office, I mean, I was exhausted, you know? So there were a bunch of phone lines that came into the restaurant for reservations. And I would take one call, put them on hold, put them on hold, put them on hold. Finally, I got back to the first line and I said, "Thanks for helping. Could I hold you?" And the guy, and the guy goes, "Sure, what time is your shift done?" Or whatever. And we laughed about it, you know. But
Well,
again, it was a way to connect. And to your point, some people aren't into humor. Other people have a different kind of humor. So you've got to know who your audience is. In this
yeah,
case, obviously we were strangers, but I think because the guy knew that I was laughing after I said what I did, that it was okay, you know. But it is interesting how there can be that connectedness with people, you know,
absolutely. Hmm.
for sure. But I also know that there's something now called laughter yoga, and laughter yoga happens sometimes. I've heard about it just for people in everyday life. I've also heard about it in hospice care centers. I've heard about it with caregiving groups, but it's something where, and I'm not exactly sure how it works, but the person who's conducting the class it'll affect your breathing and stuff, but they'll kind of like force themselves to laugh, and then people actually like do laugh in a legit way after that, and it affects them physically. So it's just interesting how that can make a difference there, and it's an actual
Well,
thing.
and
You can go
I
to.
remember, um, my in college, my job was working in computing services, and so, like, I would answer the phones, and half the time they were, kind of really like, most of the time the answer was, "Well, have you tried shutting it down and turning it back on?" And that worked. Um, but I remember this lesson, that there was this sign taped to the desk where we worked from, and that said, "Smile before you answer the phone." And I have done that my entire life because it
Yep.
100% does. It doesn't mean I'm not grumpy anymore, but just doing that with your face, yeah, I sound so much better, so much
Yes.
more cheerful
Yes.
answering the
Yep.
phone.
It's
So
why a
the
lot of
yeah,
people who are in sales jobs have what are called smile and dial, sessions. And so, yeah, because it can make a difference to your point as far as like how perky you sound over the phone. And people can tell on the other end that you're smiling. And I've also read studies that show that if you smile and say you're even by yourself, it can affect you physically because your brain is getting the signal that you're smiling. So you can, yeah, it's worth researching for sure. But it's just fascinating how we're wired,
it
you
is.
know, just
I
kind of.
had I had a full hysterectomy, 4 weeks ago tomorrow. So I've been in recovery mode for that, and for the first I kid you not, for the first, like, 2 weeks, laughing was physically painful,
Oh, I bet.
which was really
I
hard
didn't
for
even
me.
think about that. Yeah.
Yes. So I'd have friends over, I'd have a visitor, and, we'd be talking, and there would be a point usually where I'd have to say, "Okay, stop making me laugh."
Ah,
Like I appreciate it, but also too much.
right. Yeah, okay, I can see that.
So
There was one time that I was on this date after a business trip where laughter played a huge role. So I think it might have been like maybe a second or third date with this person. So I didn't know him very well yet. But I literally came from like I think two or three airports. I mean, it was like a connecting flight kind of a day, kind of crazy. So he got to the restaurant first. I get there from the airport here in Minneapolis. And we're sitting there talking, and my mind is still going, zzz, like I was still just kind of, oh, like what part of the country am I in right now? Oh, whatever. So
mhm.
as we're talking, I intended to use a metaphor, but I used it incorrectly. I mixed two by accident. So I said something to the effect of, well, you can lead a horse to water, but there are other fish in the sea. And the guy's like, yeah, fish, great. He like takes a sip of his drink.
I don't know what to say to that.
Right, right.
Well, do
But it
you
was
think
like,
that's right? Do you think that's real?
right, right, right. Yeah, he's like, I think you might have mixed up your metaphor. And then, oh my word, I was laughing so hard I thought I was gonna pee my pants. And then I'm like, okay, that'd be a little socially awkward, you know. But yeah, it's really interesting how that can affect people. But so with your journey, whether it's been brain tumor scares or from cancer and that kind of thing, what would you say in addition to laughter has helped you the most? Whether it's mindset or um, music or perspective or whatever. I mean, what other things have kind of helped just helped you along the way?
It's been a lot about figuring out how to process it, for myself, and so maybe that falls under mindset, but learning that includes learning to ask for help,
Yes.
um, because, yeah, there are times when I can't my hyper independent self can't do it all,
Yes.
and so figuring out how to reach out when that's not something that I was accustomed to, and that was all part of the process of figuring out what that meant for me. What does it mean that I have brain tumors hanging out in my head and they're not
Mm,
just dissolving and going away?
right.
What does it mean that we found a second one and then we found a third one? What is it? There's just so much that comes with that that it's a lot to carry.
Mhm.
And while you don't have to hold on to it, like you don't have to carry it all the time, like it's always there and it
Mhm.
doesn't go away. And so learning to live with it, and then as things come up, you figure out what your next step is.
You figure out the how.
Yep.
No, I agree completely. You know, so because my brain tumor, same kind as you, meningioma, and
Mhm.
it's interesting how so many people out there have them and have just no clue,
Yep.
and no clue. And it's also really interesting how, to your point, I mean, they can grow very slowly, you know, and I'm so grateful that we have the technology we do to address those things because maybe the technology 5 years from now or 10 years from now will be different from today's. Yeah, and that kind of thing. So,
Yep.
so it is interesting how there's a lot of mental gymnastics that comes with it, where you try to figure
Yes.
out the how. And sometimes it's baby steps, sometimes it's like a day by day kind of thing. But, I know that you and I, haven't spoken a whole lot outside of our support group,
Mhm.
but I can tell you that when I heard you speak at the fundraising event for Brains Together, that I got choked up, you know? I thought, "You know what?" It's like, yes, you are telling your story, but you're also giving other people a voice who aren't on stage. And I thought that's a gift that people don't always exercise. You know, maybe they'll keep their story to themselves or just want to be more private about it. And I can respect that. But point
Yes.
being is that, you know, you're not that way. So whether it's getting on stage somewhere and talking about it or sharing things in the support group or having your Torch Toby and Earl t-shirts and doing the campaign, it's you're making a difference in how you experience what's going on in your life, but you're also making a difference in other people's life and how they choose to move forward. So bravo,
Thank you.
bravo.
That's
So
really honestly, that's really important to me, because when I was, 2018, when I was diagnosed with the brain tumor, I'm looking around like the only people that you hear from are the people who it's cancerous or they need to have brain surgery or,
right.
it's escalated and it's really bad. Honestly, there was a point like going to my first couple of support groups, I was nervous that I wasn't, like, sick enough to be there. That, like,
Oh yeah,
"Well,
yeah.
my brain tumor is small. It hasn't caused any problems. It doesn't need to be treated.
Right.
Why am I here? Why am I sitting with these people who have had multiple surgeries, multiple treatments, who, came in because of these life debilitating, symptoms?" And so that was a big part of it for me is this is just new territory that people don't seem to talk about, and that's why I really wanted to talk about it. And
Oh
but
yeah.
by the way, never felt that way with support group, and I'm really glad. Like,
Yeah.
not an
Yeah.
issue, but a concern going into it.
Well, and I think that even though we can't control the quantity of life, we can still influence the quality of it. And by going to the group, it's granted people want to get some things out of it for themselves, but you can also be there for other people. And, maybe it's somebody else says, well, my experience is XYZ. Am I alone with this? And then other people, such as yourself or me or anybody else, can speak up and go, you know what, that's happened to me before as well.
Well,
And it's
you do
validating.
that, like, you can also share support and without realizing how you're impacting other people. I told a story, when I spoke at that event in October about a guy named Mark, and, I talked to Mark just last week, and I said, "Hey, like, we missed you at the event, but I talked about you on stage." He's like, "Really?" And I told him the story, and I said, "Yeah, you had one of the first times I met you, you introduced yourself, you said, 'I've had gamma knife 6 times.' And this was before I ever had it, but I knew it was coming, and I just remember this weight just lifted off of me because I was like, 'This guy's done this 6 times and he looks fine.' Like, I'm gonna
Wow.
be okay." And
You're
I
like,
just
this guy had screws in his head 6 times with the
yeah,
halo. It should be
yeah.
called something else.
And he said to me, he's like, I always tell people I get more out of this group than I ever give." He's like, "But maybe I am giving something." I said, "Yes, you are."
Yeah, yeah, it's just, and some people will give compliments, others will agree or whatever, but there are other people where they serve as examples where still waters can run deep. Maybe they're not speaking up, but you have no idea how you might be influencing them, whether it's their heart, and like emotionally, or what their thoughts are, that kind of thing. It's very, very helpful. But so the last thing that I wanted to call out about laughter is that, have you heard of the laughing gargoyle at the Denver airport?
No.
I've only seen one, but apparently there's two from what I read online.
Okay.
But in the last time I saw the gargoyle, it was in the luggage claim area. And it's this gargoyle that's sitting up on top of a shelf. And there's got to be some kind of a camera in it or something, because the gargoyle will actually banter with people who are walking by. So there's this video that I saw online where this guy is walking by with a cowboy hat that's huge, and the gargoyle asks, "Hey buddy, do you have a separate ticket for your hat for your flight or whatever?" And the guy's kind of taken aback, like, "Whoa, who's talking to me?" or whatever. But this gargoyle is hilarious. So if you Google Denver Airport gargoyle, it's pretty interesting what kind of an effect he's having on people, and whether it's employees of the airport or people who are stressed out from traveling. But definitely worth checking out. So
I went to, sorry, that reminds me of a
you're good.
story. I went to I would go to this music festival, every summer, for a while when I was in high school, and one year my friends, I don't know why, but brought this big, penguin that was like a yard ornament for Christmas. So it's middle of summer, and we have this penguin that has like a scarf and a hat, and where we ended up camping was kind of just at the corner of a popular intersection where people would walk by. And I don't know how we got here, but what we did was we put that penguin in the middle of the intersection and we put a walkie-talkie underneath it. And then we went into our tent, a screen tent, so we can see people walking by. We can see everything, and we laid down on the ground and we're talking through the walkie-talkie to people.
Right, and watching their expressions. Yes, yes, exactly. So you are the gargoyle in spirit.
Yes. Uh,
Excuse me for coughing. 1 second here.
no, thank you. I need water too.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So, where can people get your t-shirt?
I it's sold through the Bonfire website, so I'll give you the specific link because it's a long, ugly one, but it's through Bonfire.
Perfect. We can add that to the description of the podcast.
And
So,
hey, the third tumor is named Vivian.
oh my
Why, I don't know, but Vivian. And so
gosh.
the other shirt design is by Viv.
That's awesome.
So
That's really cool. That's really cool. That's awesome.
yes, so when we find another, if we find another brain tumor, we'll name that one, and I'll have another shirt ready. But
Well, there you go. There you go. That's perfect. So,
yeah,
are there any closing thoughts or comments that you want to call out or share for people as we wrap things up?
I know sometimes it's hard to figure out who, like, how and when it might be safe to use humor. And I can tell you that for a long time, I did not think humor had any place in the doctor's offices. Um, but this is where, like, some doctors, humor is fine. They can pick up on it, they'll engage in it. Um, some of my doctors, no, not at all. So
Yeah,
I guess if you've tried it and it has failed, don't let that stop you.
I
Um,
agree.
yes,
Think about my dermatologist. I mean, I never would have guessed he would have said, "Ask her a question she knows," or whatever. Yeah, I mean,
yep,
yeah, I mean, it can go. I think about even like at the Mayo Clinic, how they used to have, and maybe they still do, the singing surgeons. You know, people didn't expect that from them, and they ended
yeah,
up going on Ellen's TV show and
yeah.
different things like that. But you don't expect that from a surgeon or what have you. But it puts the human element in there, and kind of the novelty as well can make
It
people
does.
smile on the inside.
And when I first met my ENT surgeon, um, I just remember dropping a joke and thinking, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." And he laughed and he dropped a joke and I was like, "Wait a minute. You're like, this is okay. Like you speak my language." And so
Yes.
I don't know, just the level of comfort there. And that like, yeah. And so there are doctors that I don't joke with.
Yeah.
And you kind of you feel it out, you figure it out. My
Absolutely.
some of my family doesn't like to joke about these things.
Uh-huh.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't need to do that, that's fine, but,
Yeah. You
I
learn.
know my people, and it is
Yes.
so therapeutic.
Well, well, then consider me one of your people.
Yes,
So,
excellent.
but all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Ashley, for being here. I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to go to YouTube and like and subscribe to the podcast called Emotional Grit for this episode and others. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.